Just imagine a mother with two small children spending another night outside, lying on the cold ground of a square, with her body covered in dirt, her face marked by exhaustion, and her heart crushed by the pain of not having anything to feed her own children. Now, try to visualize the scene, she hugging her two boys with the little strength she had left, trying to protect them from the freezing wind, while the people around her passed by, looked away, and pretended that she simply didn't exist. Her stomach was empty, the fear on her face, the silent crying of her children, all of that happening there, right in the middle of the city, with people coming and going, laughing, shopping, as if that mother and those children were invisible, until, out of nowhere, something totally unexpected happened. A car, one of those luxury ones, black, imposing, stopped right in front of the square. People who had been ignoring the scene until then began to look. The tension increased. Those nearby stopped to watch. A man got out of the car, an unfamiliar face, but with a presence that no one could ignore. The way he walked, his steady gaze, and the most surprising thing, his destination was only one: to go straight to that woman, the same one that everyone had despised minutes before. And it is here, exactly here, that this story begins to take a turn, because what happened next involved public humiliation, injustice, tears, a twist that no one could have imagined, and an ending that, look, will move you from beginning to end. So stay with me, because this is not just another story of suffering. It is a story of overcoming, poetic justice and transformation, the kind of story that makes us cry, revolt, cheer, and believe again that even in the worst phases of life, the impossible can happen. This is the story of how a woman who slept with her children in the square had her life completely transformed. At the exact moment, the African millionaire stopped his car. Amara was there, lying on the hard, dirty ground of the central square, with her two small children huddled against her chest, trying somehow to create a barrier between the biting cold of the early morning and the children's fragile bodies. It was just a piece of cardboard, thin, torn at the edges, as if it had been found in the trash. And indeed, it had been. But at that moment, that was all Amara had to protect her children. The world around them seemed to spin at a different speed. People in expensive clothes, shopping bags in their hands, rushing to catch the last bus, couples laughing at silly jokes, young people filming stories for Instagram, and Amara was there, invisible. The saddest thing. It wasn't just the cold, it wasn't just the hunger that burned inside her, as if her stomach were a black hole sucking out any remaining energy. What hurt the most was the indifference. People simply looked away. Some, at most, crossed their arms with a look of disgust, as if she were the problem that needed to be swept under the city's rug. There was a man in a suit who walked by, looked at her with contempt, and even muttered loudly enough for Amara to hear, "Another slut who doesn't want to work. She only knows how to have children to beg for money." That pierced her chest like a knife. Amara didn't respond. She didn't have the strength. She just hugged her children tighter, as if that hug were an invisible shield against the cruelty of the world. The boys were shaking. The youngest, maybe 3 years old, was crying softly. He didn't even have any tears left. His little body seemed used to suffering. His skin, once smooth, was now covered in spots and dirt. His eyes were sunken, as if his childhood had been stolen before it even began. The oldest tried to be strong. He did everything he could not to cry in front of his mother. But at times, when the wind was colder, he couldn't hold it in. And do you know what was worse? It wasn't their first night there. For weeks now, that square had become the family's home, a patch of ground on the sidewalk, between the cement bench and the dry flower bed, without flowers, without life. During the day, Amara would try to get some change, ask for bread, collect cans. But at night it was hell. The fear of someone coming, of being attacked, of being taken away. or worse, of some stranger messing with her children. There were people who stopped just to take pictures. Can you believe it? As if they were a street attraction. There was a group of teenagers who spent a day laughing out loud, pointing their fingers and filming on their cell phones. One of them even had the courage to post on social media with the caption, "Look at the human trash in our city." Amara heard this from afar because a girl who was selling coffee on the corner commented later with pity in her eyes. But pity, that was all she received. Pity and judgment. Amara asked herself every day, how did she get there? How did life turn into this? It was as if every night was an endurance test, and she was almost at her limit. She had already wondered if one day that would change, or if her and her children's destiny would be to die there, forgotten, like so many others she had seen lying on the sidewalks. And the cold, oh, the cold was a chapter in itself, because it wasn't just the cold of the temperature, it was the cold of the soul, that internal ice of knowing that no one cares, of seeing people pass by you as if you didn't exist, and when they notice, it's only to judge, to condemn, to reinforce that feeling that you are less than nothing. But even at that low point, Amara still had one thing, a mother's instinct. It didn't matter if she was hungry, if her body ached, if her eyes burned from crying so much in secret. She did everything to protect her children. She wrapped them up in the few clothes she had. She gave them the torn blanket and left them exposed to the wind. When she got a piece of bread, she divided it between 3, and always left the biggest part for them. It was the kind of love that didn't need words. And that morning, while she was arranging the boys, trying to arrange the cardboard in a way that would protect them a little more, Amara had no idea what was about to happen. She had no idea that someone completely outside of her reality was about to stop the car right there in front of her and change everything. But before, now she would still have to go through another humiliation that no one would forget anytime soon. And it is precisely at this turning point, at this moment when hope seems non-existent, that destiny begins to write a new page in Amara's story. Only the way this happened and what that man did right after getting out of the car is something that, well, you'll understand better when I tell you what happened next. If this story touched you, if it brought a lump to your throat or brought back a difficult memory, know this. This is the right place for those who truly feel it. This is where the most moving stories from Africa are given a voice. Stories of pain, struggle, and twists and turns that make your heart race. Each video is a hug, a lesson, a new hope that good still wins. So, let's be part of this family that values true emotion. Like now, and click the subscribe button, because the next stories will touch you even more deeply. Amara looked at the small piece of bread she held in her hands. It was hard, almost dry, the kind of thing most people would throw away without thinking twice. But to her, at that moment, it was a treasure, the only food she had gotten all day. A man had rushed by earlier, tossed the bread next to a trash can, and before the pigeons could even arrive, Amara ran and grabbed it. Not because she wasn't ashamed. She was. But her children's hunger was greater than any pride. The 2 boys were lying down, their eyes almost closing from exhaustion and weakness, when Amara broke the bread into 3 small pieces. It was already routine, sharing the little, stretching the maximum. She gave a piece to each of them and kept the smallest one, as she always did. But it was then, just as she was putting the piece in her mouth, that she heard a cry, a thin, heartfelt cry that broke her heart. It came from close by, from a corner of the square, right next to the broken streetlight that hadn't been lit for weeks. Amara turned her head with that motherly instinct that recognizes a child's cry from afar, and what she saw froze her for a few seconds. There was a little girl. She must have been about 4 years old, sitting on the floor, hugging her legs, her face buried in her knees. She was crying as if the world had collapsed on top of her. Her clothes were torn, her feet bare and dirty. Her hair was tangled as if it hadn't seen a comb in months. That crying, that loneliness, was like a punch in Amara's stomach. For a moment she looked at her children. She thought about how little she had. She thought about how hungry she herself felt. She thought about the night she went to bed with an empty stomach and the bitter taste of defeat in her mouth. She could very well pretend she didn't see it, like everyone did to her every day. She could turn her face away, pretend that those cries weren't her problem. But her heart, oh, Amara's heart wouldn't let her. It was as if that pain was hers too, as if that girl was an extension of her own children. Without thinking much, Amara stood up, walked to the corner of the square, and crouched down next to the little girl. She lightly touched her shoulder, carefully, so as not to scare her. The girl raised her face, her eyes red, tears still streaming. Her gaze carried the same desperation that Amara saw every day in the mirror. Without saying a word, Amara held out the piece of bread in her hands. It wasn't big. It wasn't going to satisfy anyone's hunger. But at that moment, that piece of bread meant everything. It was a gesture of humanity, of love, of someone who, even with a heart full of scars, still chose to help. The girl took the bread with trembling little hands. She looked at Amara as if she couldn't believe that someone was there for her, and she bit it so quickly, as if she was afraid that someone would take it from her mouth. As she watched the little girl devour that piece of bread, Amara swallowed hard. She felt her stomach churn, her hunger scream even louder, but deep down a strange peace took hold of her, a certainty that, despite everything, she was still a good person, someone who didn't let suffering harden her heart. And at that moment, while she was watching the girl, Amara didn't even notice, but someone on the other side of the street, inside a parked car, was watching everything. Watching her every move, every gesture, every expression on her tired face, but still full of humanity. This person, who until then seemed like just another one of the many people who passed by and ignored her, was there, paying attention, with their eyes fixed, as if they were seeing something that no one else could see. But Amara, of course, had no idea. Her focus was only one, protecting her children, and now, that girl, too. She went back to her usual place, hugged her children again, straightened the cardboard, and with her stomach growling even more after giving up the only food she had, she closed her eyes, trying once again to fall asleep before the dawn made the temperature drop even further. Little did Amara know that that gesture, that simple piece of bread, would be the beginning of a turning point in her life that not even in her wildest dreams would she have the courage to imagine. ChatGPT said the sun had barely begun to rise, and Amara was already awake. The boys were still sleeping, hugging each other, trying to escape the cold as best they could. Amara, as she always did, went to the corner to try to get some water from an old bottle she kept. She paced back and forth, already with that familiar pain in her stomach, but it wasn't even hunger at that moment. It was anxiety, fear of what another day in that never-ending battle would be like. Then, out of nowhere, she heard a voice, loud, sharp, one of those that cut through the air like a knife. A woman, very well dressed, wearing a long dress, designer glasses and heels so high that it seemed impossible to walk on. Those potholed sidewalks stopped right in front of where Amara slept with her children. The woman didn't speak softly. She didn't even try to hide it. On the contrary, she seemed to insist on shouting every word, as if she were performing for an audience. "These dirty people should be arrested. I don't want to see these beggars in my city." The sentence came like a punch. And the worst part, laughter came right after. Laughter from other people passing by, from two young men sitting on a bench, from a lady selling flowers on the sidewalk. Even the security guard at a nearby store chuckled in the corner, trying to hide it, but clearly finding it funny. Amara froze. Her face burned with embarrassment. Her blood rushed to the point where it felt like her heart was going to explode. It wasn't the first time she had heard things like that, but like that, in public, in front of her children, it was too much. She tried to pretend she didn't hear. She tried to lower her head and just go back to her usual place. But it was as if every word that woman said echoed off the walls of the square, as if every person who passed by now looked at her with even more contempt. Amara felt the tears wanting to fall, but she held them back. She knew that if she cried, the boys would wake up and understand everything, and she didn't want them to grow up thinking their mother was weak, even though she felt broken inside. The woman stood there for a few seconds, looking disgusted, adjusting her sunglasses, as if she had just done society a great favor by offending a mother with 2 small children. Then she turned her back, got into the luxury car that was waiting for her on the corner, and drove away, as if nothing had happened, as if she had simply driven away yet another morning nuisance. Amara took a deep breath. She looked at her children, still sleeping, and for a second her mind wandered, thinking about everything she had been through to get to that point, thinking about how cruel life can be, how people can be quick to judge and so slow to reach out. But what she had no idea is that that scene, that public humiliation, had been seen, and not by just anyone, someone who at that exact moment, inside a car parked on the other side of the street, was watching everything attentively, in silence, and was already starting to make a decision that would change her destiny forever. No one there had any idea who Amara was before that square became her address. No one imagined that this woman with the tired look, torn clothes and disheveled hair once had a completely different life. Before everything fell apart, Amara lived in a simple but lively little house in a remote neighborhood. She had a small backyard where her children played, a kitchen where she loved to make cornmeal cake on the weekends, and an old but comfortable sofa where everyone would huddle together to watch soap operas at night. The husband? A hard-working man. He wasn't rich, far from it, but he did what he could to provide the basics at home. They were happy with little, true happiness, the kind that we only understand the value of when we lose it. But life has these cruelties that come without warning. It was one Sunday morning. Amara woke up to the smell of smoke. Still a little dizzy, not really understanding what was happening, she ran to the children's room. She screamed for her husband. The fire had already taken over the entire room. There was hardly any time to save anything. She grabbed her children in her arms, trying to protect them as best she could, and ran out the back door in the middle of the smoke. Her husband, he tried to go back to get his documents, clothes, anything he could save, but he couldn't get out in time. The noise of the neighbors screaming, the sirens arriving too late, the shocked faces looking from afar. All of this became a blur in Amara's head. The only thing that remained clear was the pain, the loss, the feeling that the ground had disappeared from under her feet. After that came the seemingly endless downfall, without a husband, without a home, without any money saved, with 2 small children in her arms. Amara started going from one favor to another, from one shelter to another. At first, there were even people who helped. A neighbor lent her his couch for a few days. A lady from church donated some clothes. But over time, the doors started to close. Everyone went back to their own routine, and Amara was left behind. One day she heard from a former co-worker, "You need to stop playing the victim and get a job." As if it were easy, as if someone would hire a single mother with 2 small children, no place to sleep, no address to put on her resume. And that's how the square became her new address. That's how the cold floor replaced the bed, that the sidewalk became a cradle for her children, and that people's gaze became her new daily judgment. No one passed by her imagining the story behind it. No one knew about the loss, the pain, the despair of having nowhere to go. It was easier to point the finger and call her lazy, a slut, a filthy city. Amara listened to everything in silence. I had already learned that trying to explain was useless. Those who want to judge don't listen. Those who want to humiliate don't want to know the truth. She carried this inside her every day. She kept going because of her children, because of the promise she made to herself the night she saw her. Houseburn, as long as I have a thread of life, I will fight for them. And just that day, after another sleepless night, after the humiliation she had just suffered from the rich woman, just when everything seemed to be reaching its limit, Amara had no idea that someone on the other side of the street was starting to look at her differently, a look that, in a few hours, would turn into action, an attitude that no one there in the square expected, least of all her. But before that moment, in good happen, there was still a surprise that would come first, something that, again, would test Amara's heart in a way she would never forget. While Amara tried to tuck her children under the cardboard, struggling to control the pain she still felt in her chest after hearing the rich woman's words, a strange noise caught the attention of those passing by the square. It wasn't the noise of a motorcycle or an old bus. It was the sound of a powerful engine, the kind that makes it seem like the ground vibrates a little when it passes by. It was a large car, black, shining so brightly that it reflected the sunlight like a mirror. It wasn't the kind of car you often saw in that part of the city, much less parked in front of a square where homeless people slept. Amara tried not to look. She had already learned that when rich people showed up there, what followed was never good. Either the police were patrolling or people wanted to do charity with an audience, filming everything to post on social media as if it were a trophy for a good deed. But something about that situation was different. The car didn't speed up to leave. They didn't roll down the window to throw coins from afar. The passenger door opened slowly, and a man got out. He wasn't old, but he didn't look that young either. Tall, with a firm posture, with the look of someone who was used to walking in places where respect came before any word. The most curious thing was his clothing. No suit, tie, or those flashy clothes of those who like to show off. The man wore simple pants, a well-ironed cotton shirt, and a pair of shoes that, despite being discreet, revealed that they weren't from just any store. But what caught the most attention, what made even the security guard of the store nearby stop to look, was the way he looked at everything around him, as if he was analyzing every detail, every person, every look of contempt, every child lying on the floor. Amara tried to lower her head. She felt her face burn with embarrassment. Her hair was all messy, her blouse was torn, her feet were dirty from walking barefoot. Her instinct was to shrink back, to become invisible, like she always did. But before she could hide completely under the cardboard, the man started walking towards her, step by step without rushing, as if he knew exactly what he was doing, as if that square was the only place he wanted to be at that moment. Some people around him started to look, whisper, as if to say, "There goes." Another curious person wanting to put on a little show. But it wasn't like that at all. The man stopped right in front of Amara. He crouched down to her level, and with a look that mixed firmness and kindness, he spread out a blanket, clean, new, still smelling of freshly washed fabric. Amara froze. For a second, she stared at it as if it were a mirage. It was rare to win something, and when it happened, it was always accompanied by looks of pity or phrases like, "Make good use of it." "Ha, don't waste it." But the man didn't say anything like that. He just offered the blanket as if he were handing over something important as an equal. And it didn't stop there. From the backpack he was carrying on his back, he took out a package of bread and a bottle of water. He handed them all to her without rushing, without fuss, without expecting anyone to applaud. What touched Amara the most, however, was his gaze. For the first time in a long time, someone looked into her eyes with respect, without disgust, without judgment, without that expression of superiority that she had memorized from seeing so many times. It was a direct, human look, as if he saw beyond the dirt, beyond the torn clothes, as if he truly saw Amara. She tried to thank him, but her voice wouldn't come out. Her throat was dry, not just from hunger, but from emotion. Inside, her head was spinning. Who was this man? Why did he, unlike everyone else, seem to actually care? Little did Amara know that gesture, that blanket, and that look were just the beginning. His approach had a reason, an intention that she had no idea about yet, and what he was about to do, the next step that this mysterious man was going to take, was something that would leave not only her, but the entire square completely in shock. And the most curious detail, before any grand action, he still had something to say, something that would forever change the way Amara saw the people around her. As Amara held the blanket to her chest, still trying to figure out if this was all real or just another one of those strange dreams that hunger usually provoked, the movement around her began to change. People who had previously just walked by in a hurry, pretending she didn't exist, were now watching her. But it wasn't a look of compassion. Far from it. It was that kind of crooked look, full of judgment. The same look she had already memorized in minute detail over the last few weeks in that square. One of the street vendors who was always there selling popcorn and soda shook his head and said loudly, without the slightest care to hide the fact that he was mocking, "Another idiot helping a street bum. This one is going to learn the hard way." Others started laughing. Two guys who were leaning against the wall, drinking soda and playing with their cell phones, made a point of commenting out loud, "I bet he thinks he's going to save the world. Soon she'll scam him and disappear." With his wallet, a lady who sold flowers, who always looked at Amara with contempt, crossed her arms and said in a sour tone, "These rich men have such habits. Waste your time with this filth. You really won't learn." Amara heard everything, every word, every muffled giggle, every whisper. She tried to pretend she hadn't heard, but it was impossible. The words seemed to go straight to her skin, like needles. For a moment, she almost gave the blanket back, almost got up and left, just to avoid yet another public humiliation. She knew that script by heart. First came the help, then the regret, then the abandonment, and finally her own regret for having accepted any crumbs. But at that moment, there was something that made Amara grip the blanket even tighter, and for the first time in a long time, look up. It was the way the man, that stranger who seemed out of place there, reacted to all of that. He heard the comments. Clearly you heard. You could tell the words had reached him. But instead of cringing, of apologizing, of being embarrassed, he just stood there, standing still, with an expression on his face that mixed calm and contempt, only not for her, but for the people who were mocking him. His gaze swept over every face around him, as if he wanted to remember who was laughing, who was judging, who was having fun at the expense of other people's pain. He didn't say a word. He didn't make a fuss. But that silence, that steady gaze, made many people look away. Embarrassed, even without admitting it, Amara felt something strange in her chest, a mixture of shame with relief, with a little bit of hope that she herself was afraid to nurture. She still had no idea who this man was, or what else he intended to do. But in that moment, for the first time in a long time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, things could start to change. The problem is that what happened next came like an avalanche, a new situation that took everyone by surprise, and that, well, you'll see, was the true beginning of the turning point in Amara's life. The night had barely begun. The cold that was already harsh during the day seemed to triple after the sun hid behind the buildings. Amara tried to tuck the boys under the blanket that the stranger had given her earlier. I still had that in my head, that moment, that look, that gesture of kindness that seemed so out of place there. The fabric still smelled like new clothes, something the children hadn't smelled in months. The boys, exhausted, had finally fallen asleep. Amara sat there, leaning against the wall of the closed newsstand, trying not to let sleep win too. Her head was pounding. Will he come back tomorrow? Was that just a coincidence? Was he one of those eccentric rich people who helps one day and disappears the next? But before she could finish her thought, the lights of a white pickup truck with the City Hall symbol cut across the entire square. High beams, screams, and right after, two more cars arriving behind. Amara felt her heart stop. She was familiar with that scene. It wasn't the first time the city government had done that. But that night, it seemed like they were more aggressive than ever. Men in reflective vests got out of their cars, shouting orders. One of them, with a megaphone in his hand, shouted in the middle of the square, "Everyone needs to leave now. This is a public space. We will not tolerate this mess any longer. Anyone who doesn't get up in 5 minutes will be forcibly removed." Panic spread. People hurriedly gathered bags, picked up cardboard, old blankets, desperate mothers picking up their children, old people trying to get up with shaky legs, some crying, others screaming, others just frozen, not knowing what to do. Amara, she could only do one thing: hug her children. She hugged them so tightly that it seemed like she wanted to hide them inside her own body. The children woke up scared, crying, not understanding anything. The youngest asked quietly with a trembling voice, "Mommy, what's happening?" But how to explain, how to put into words that feeling of terror, despair, and helplessness? Amara's face was already wet with tears before she even realized she was crying. She looked around, trying to find a way out, a corner, any place where she could run with the boys. But where to? There was nowhere to go. No shelter would accept more people. No neighbor had space. No kind soul nearby would even offer a place on the ground. The man from the city hall came closer. He shouted, he pointed, he told her to get up right away. Amara tried to say that she had nowhere to go, but her voice came out weak, almost a whisper. The employee didn't even want to hear it. He shouted back that if she didn't leave on her own, they would collect everything and throw it in the truck. The shame was different. Several people who were passing by stopped to watch the scene, some with pitying looks, others laughing, others filming with their cell phones. Once again, Amara became the public spectacle of the night. Once again, her dignity was trampled on in front of everyone. But what about the man in the blanket? Where was he? Had he gone away? Had he not even seen what was happening? Amara could only think about that as she tried to get up, trembling, with her children hanging on her lap and the few belongings she had thrown inside a torn bag. But what she didn't imagine is that that man was there nearby, watching everything and about to take an action that no one in that square would forget any time soon. And it was right in the middle of all that chaos, with people running, screaming, city employees pulling blankets, throwing cardboard into the truck, with the children crying and Amara desperate, that the unexpected happened. While she tried, as best she could, to protect her children with her own body, a strange movement began on the street next to the square. First, there was the sound of another engine, much more powerful than the city cars. Then, the sound of tires braking lightly, with precision, like someone who parks on purpose to cause an impact. Amara didn't even have time to understand what was happening. She only noticed the sudden silence that took over a good part of the square. Even the officers' shouts died down for a few seconds. Everyone turned their heads in the same direction. A car, completely different from anything that had ever stopped there, was parked. One of those luxury models that most people only see in magazines or on celebrities' social media. And before anyone could muster up the courage to go there, the back door opened. From inside, the man came out. Yes, the same one who had given Amara the blanket earlier. But this time, he wasn't alone. Along with him came out 2 huge security guards, the kind who arrives opening up space with the posture of someone who is there to protect someone very important. Behind a television reporter, with a microphone in his hand, shouting as if he had just met an international celebrity. The reporter's voice echoed throughout the square. "This is the most powerful African millionaire in town, the businessman who moves millions a year and who has just arrived in person." The reaction was immediate. Those who had been laughing at Amara's face minutes before were now left open-mouthed. Some people's eyes widened, some people dropped their cell phones on the floor, and some City Hall employees simply froze in place, not knowing whether to continue with the operation or pretend they weren't there. Amara, paralyzed, couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her hands were shaking, her heart was racing, as if it was going to explode inside her chest. For a second, she thought she was dreaming. That same person who hours before had knelt in front of her, handed her a blanket, looked into her eyes with respect, was now there, surrounded by security guards, with cameras pointed at him, being a millionaire, powerful, one of the most influential men in the city. And it was then, right at that moment, that the man began walking towards Amara. Each step he took seemed to make the ground shake. People made way. Curious eyes followed everything. The onlookers' cell phones were already on recording mode, but he only had eyes for one person in that entire square, Amara. What he said when he got close, and mainly what he did right after, was what really left everyone speechless. But this is a part of the story that, well, you need to see in the next sequel, because what happened there, in that exact second, changed not only her life, but everyone who was in that place. The next day arrived, and the news spread like wildfire throughout the city. The video of the square was already circulating in WhatsApp groups, on gossip pages, and even on local TV channels. Everyone wanted to know more about the mysterious millionaire who appeared out of nowhere, interrupted the city, government's actions, and in the midst of everyone else, defended a mother with 2 children who was sleeping on the street. But what no one knew was that the story was far from over. Early in the morning, while Amara was still trying to understand if what she had experienced in the last few hours was true or a crazy dream, something started to happen to the rich woman, the same one who had yelled at her in the square, calling her filth, someone who should be arrested. The woman's name, Donna Estella, a well-known figure in the neighborhood, one of those who loved to show up at condominium meetings just to criticize those who didn't follow the rules, who fought with the neighbors because of noise, and who made a point of showing that her money was worth more than any human being there. Donna Estella lived in a high-end building, and guess who owned the building? That's right, the same man who defended Amara that night in the square, the same man who now, with a simple signature on a piece of paper, could completely change the course of the nosy neighbor's life. When Donna Estella woke up that morning, the doorman was pale, trembling. He could only deliver an official letter, with the seal of the real estate company that managed the building. It was an eviction notice with an immediate deadline and a detail that left her completely devastated. The reason: eviction due to disrespect, prejudice, and hostile attitudes towards people in situations of social vulnerability. Yes, the woman who, the day before, had made a point of humiliating Amara in front of everyone, was now forced to leave the luxury apartment where she had lived for years. The same place where she thought she was the owner of the truth was no longer hers. And the worst part, everyone in the building found out. It became the talk of the halls, the elevators, and the morning chats. The same people who were once afraid of Donna Estella were now whispering, some even with a certain pleasure in their voices. Serves her right. It took a while for someone to put a stop to her. Meanwhile, Amara, who was still getting used to the idea of not having to sleep on the sidewalk, experienced a moment that seemed like a miracle. The millionaire, the man everyone now called the Angel of the Square, took her and her children to a beautiful building in a safe neighborhood, with plenty of space for the children to play. Nothing over the top luxurious, but a clean, fragrant apartment with real beds, a bathroom with hot water, a full refrigerator, and most importantly, a door, a key, a real roof. Amara entered that place, and for a few minutes she just stood there, looking at every corner, as if she was afraid of touching things and waking up from a dream. The boys? They ran around the room, laughed, jumped on the bed, opened the closet doors just to make sure that it was all real, and there was more. The millionaire not only gave them a home, but also found a new school for her children. A real school, with attentive teachers, lunch on time, complete school supplies, something Amara never imagined her children would have so soon. To top it all off, he even offered her a decent job, no handouts, a real job, a position in his social enterprise, helping other families in similar situations, because, as he himself said, no one is better than someone who has experienced it firsthand, to understand and welcome those who are still struggling. That night, as she lay in bed for the first time in years, with her children sleeping peacefully beside her, Amara cried, but it was a different kind of cry. It wasn't a cry of pain or fear. It was a cry of relief, of gratitude, of someone who had spent so long being invisible, and now, finally, felt seen. And do you know what's most beautiful? Before turning off the lights, she looked at the ceiling, closed her eyes, and whispered softly, "Thank you, God, for not forgetting me." Amara's life had been a series of falls, losses, and forced new beginnings. Every cold night in that square, every humiliation she listened to in silence, every tear she shed in silence while hugging her children to protect them from the wind, all of this had left deep scars. But it had also built a strength within her that no one saw, a strength that only those who have hit rock bottom can understand. And in that moment, lying in a real bed, with her children sleeping safely for the first time in years, Amara understood what had previously seemed impossible to believe. God had never stopped watching over her, even on the nights when she thought she was completely alone, even when the cold seemed too much, even when the whole world turned its back on her. Someone up there was watching, noting every tear, preparing the right moment to act. The truth is, you never know how big a battle someone is facing. That's why you can never underestimate a kind heart. Amara may have had nothing material. Her clothes were torn. Her face was tired. But the most valuable thing she had was the kindness that she never let die, even with everything trying to harden her chest. And it's like that with a lot of people, right? There are a lot of Amaras out there, a lot of invisible people, fighting to survive, holding back tears in the middle of the street, doing good even though they have nothing. And what this story shows is that, even though it seems like the world has forgotten, the answer will come. It may take a while. It may come from where we least expect it. It may happen in the middle of a square, in a moment of despair, but it will come. God sees every tear, every time someone chooses to be good, even though they have every reason to give up. And when the right time comes, life changes, blessings happen, justice comes, and the heart that once cried in pain, learns what it is to cry in relief, in happiness, in gratitude. So, for those who are watching this video right now, feeling their hearts ache, thinking that life is too hard, just remember one thing: never underestimate the power of a kind heart. Never lose faith, because when you least expect it, the answer comes. And Amara's story is there to prove it. What a powerful story, right? One way or another, this story touched you, whether it was a memory, an emotion, or even that desire to believe that good things still happen, even when everything seems lost. And look, if this video brought you some reflection, that lump in your throat, or that desire to see things in a different way, then it's worth spreading this feeling. A simple like and your subscription here on the channel will already make this message reach more people who, like you, also need to hear stories like this. Stories that warm, that move, and that restore a little hope. And there's more. Now it's your turn. comment below the word Part 2 if you want to know what happened to Donna Estela, because look, her life changed in a way that not even she imagined. And I'll only tell you if there are a lot of people who want to know. Oh, and before I go, the video that's appearing on your screen right now is a story that touches us even more, with a twist that only those who follow the channel know how surprising it is. Click on it now and stay with me, because what's coming next is even more exciting.